When the skies went dark, no one screamed. There was no grand proclamation, no defiant chorus of rebellion against the Imperium. Only the quiet hum of generators dying in the manufactoria, and the slow fading of the orbital lights that had once marked Caligora's place among the stars. The silence arrived like a slow exhalation, as though the world itself had grown weary of being seen. I remember the day it began. I was a child, watching from the hab roof of Block 47, my hands still smelling of burnt promethium and iron dust. The sky above was a pale gray veil, streaked with the contrails of departing ships. The older workers whispered that the administratum had revoked our charter, that the tides had gone unpaid for too long, and that the Emperor's patience had limits. We did not know what that meant not yet, but we felt it in the air. The Vox towers ceased their chatter, the astropathic choir hall fell silent. And then, one by one, the great orbital stations winked out like dying embers. Our overseers told us nothing. The priests of the local ministorum claimed the silence was a test, a holy punishment for our sins. But by the next solar cycle, even they stopped preaching. They burned their own sermons in the courtyards, as if destroying the words could erase the crime of having spoken them. I remember the scent of parchment and incense mingling in the wind, and the look in my mother's eyes as she whispered, "Do not say his name, not anymore." In the weeks that followed, Caligora began to fold in upon itself. The great manufactoria of those titanic lungs that had once fed the Imperium's endless wars were shuttered. The banners bearing the imperial Aquila were torn down under the pretext of reallocation. But we all knew it was fear. The Emperor's symbol drew eyes, and eyes meant discovery. The planetary VoxNet was dismantled section by section, each transmitter disassembled and buried under the red dirt plains. We learned to speak in silence, to live without being seen. The elders said it was mercy. The silence meant survival, for if the Imperium found us again, they would bring tithe collectors, compliance fleets, and inquisitors who asked questions. No one survived answering. So we obeyed. We learned to hide. And in time, even the youngest among us forgot that we were ever meant to be part of something larger. The Emperor's light was just another old story. Like the monsters we were told lived beneath the manufactoria vents. I was 20 when I first heard the truth of what had happened. I was working in the scrapyards beyond the southern spire, when old Carlin, a half-blind servitor angler, told me the administratum hadn't merely forgotten Uste had erased us. He showed me a fragment of a data slate he'd found buried in a ruined relay tower. Its edges melted from age and heat. The lettering was faded, but I could still make out the seal. The double-headed Aquila struck through with a red line. Below it, in low Gothic, the words, "Expunged, non-compliant, asset deleted." I did not understand what it meant until later. Caligora had not rebelled. It had simply been deemed unworthy of saving. During the madness of the age of apostasy, when whole systems burned in the name of corrupted faith, someone high in the administratum had declared our world lost, perhaps by mistake, perhaps by design, and struck our name from the archives. And once the Imperium had forgotten us, no one came to correct it. No tithes, no fleets, no orders, just silence. But a void does not stay empty for long. In that silence, something else began to speak. It began as dreams. Not the kind one wakes from, but the kind that leave residue the scent of ozone. The echo of machinery whispering in languages without breath. The miners from the southern shafts spoke of seeing glimmers beneath the rock, as if the veins of ore were pulsing with light. The priests who still dared to keep vigil began hearing voices. During their midnight prayers, words they swore were neither of the Emperor nor the warp, but something between. And then came the first disappearance. A survey team, 8 men and women from Manufactorum 12, descended into the lower tunnels to map a collapsed transport route. They did not return. Days later, one of their crawler units emerged alone, its Vox recorder filled with static. Beneath the static, when amplified, was a single repeated phrase. I remember it because the whole Hablock whispered of it for weeks. The words were, "We are remembered." At first, no one knew what to make of it. The phrase spread through the Habs, through the drinking dens and labor communes, mutating with each retelling. Some said it was a sign of hope that perhaps the Emperor had not forgotten us after all. Others whispered that it was something far worse, that the machines below the surface had begun to think again, to remember themselves in ways they were never meant to. In the end, it did not matter which was true. Both were dangerous. That night, as the wind howled through the empty Vox towers, I climbed the hill above the southern spire and looked toward the dead horizon. The stars above were faint, veiled by the planet's heavy dust storms. But for a heartbeat, a single, trembling heartbeat, I saw something move among them. A flicker of light, like an eye-opening, where none should be. It vanished as quickly as it came. But in that instant, I felt a terrible certainty. Caligora had not been forgotten. It had been hidden. And now, something had found it again. The first storm season after the silence was the worst anyone could remember. The sky turned the color of old blood, and the ash winds cut through the hablocks like knives. The great turbines of the upper manufactoria ground to a halt, their colossal blades frozen in place, as if even the air itself had forgotten how to move. We lived in darkness for nearly a month, huddled in the surviving on stale ration bars and melted ice siphoned from the coolant tanks. It was during those endless nights that the whispers began to change. They stopped being just words, stopped being just dreams. I remember lying awake one night, listening to the hum of the emergency generators. When the sound shifted, beneath the drone, I could hear it, a pulse, slow and rhythmic, like the beat of a buried heart. It wasn't in the air. It was in the metal, in the walls, in the bones of the manufactoria itself. The elders told us to ignore it, to pray to whatever gods still listened. But no one prayed to the emperor anymore. His name had become a relic, a word spoken only in fear or superstition. Instead, people began to speak of the sleeper below. It was said that he had been buried beneath Caligora, long before the Imperium's founding, a god of the deep who had once given light to the forges and fire to the machines. Some claimed he had awoken during the Great Silence, roused by the absence of the emperor's gaze. Others swore it was just the echo of old machinery, vast engines that had never truly stopped working. Whatever it was, it gave people something to believe in again, and belief, even false belief, is a dangerous thing on a forgotten world. By the time I reached my 22nd solar, the cults had begun to spread. They called themselves the Keepers of the Hollow Star. They met in the abandoned cathedrals and burnt out data holes, whispering their hymns to a god whose name was never spoken aloud. They painted symbols across the walls, spirals of black ash and red pigment, patterns that made the eyes ache if you stared too long. At first, they were tolerated. They cleaned the streets, distributed rations, even repaired old generators. But slowly, their reach grew. They began to take children from the lower habs, claiming they had been chosen to serve in the dark, beneath the man. No one stopped them. No one dared. One day, a squad of enforcers tried. I was there when they marched into the southern chapel, their lasguns drawn, and their rebreathers hissing. We all gathered in the plaza to watch. The cultists didn't fight back. They simply stood in silence, heads bowed, as the enforcers stormed the chapel. Minutes later, the building shook. There was a scream, high and metallic, and then the entire structure collapsed in on itself. The dust cloud took hours to settle. When it did, there was no sign of the enforcers. Not their weapons, not their bodies, nothing. After that, no one spoke against the keepers again. The chapel was sealed with sheets of rusted metal, and marked with a single warning, scrawled in oil. Below lies memory. I didn't understand what it meant until I met them myself. It happened by accident. I was working a late shift in the lower yards, clearing debris from the collapsed tunnels beneath Manufactorum 12, the same place where the first survey team had vanished. My August lamp flickered in the gloom, its beam cutting through the dust like a blade. That was when I saw it. A mark carved into the wall, faint and deliberate, a spiral of 9 lines, twisting inward toward a single hollow point. I don't know why I followed it. Maybe curiosity, maybe something else. But, as I traced the symbols deeper into the tunnel, I began to feel the air grow warmer, heavier. The hum that had haunted my dreams for years was louder down there, vibrating in my chest, like a living thing. Then, I found them. A circle of figures stood around a pit, cloaked in rags, their faces hidden behind crude metallic masks. The masks were old machine casings, polished until they gleamed like mirrors. In their hands, they held data slates, inscribed with lines of Binharic code, though none of them could have possibly read it. They were chanting, their voices weaving together in a low, metallic rhythm that didn't sound human. At the center of the pit lay something, vast and glimmering, half buried beneath stone and slag. I could only see part of it, a curve of golden alloy, etched with sigils that hurt to look at. It pulsed faintly with light, as if it were breathing. One of the masked figures turned toward me. I froze. You hear it too, they said, their voice a whisper distorted by vox static. The song beneath the silence. I wanted to run. I should have, but something in their words rooted me to the spot. I could hear it now clearer than ever. The pulse, the hum, the voice. It wasn't madness. It was real. Asterisk. The figure stepped closer, extending a gloved hand. Do not be afraid. We do not worship death. We remember it, and soon, the Emperor will remember us. Asterisk. I stumbled backward, breaking from their gaze, and fled up the tunnel. When I reached the surface, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my vox torch. But the hum followed me. It stayed in my ears for days. Asterisk. That night, the ground beneath Caligora trembled, faintly at first, then with growing strength, as though something vast and buried had shifted in its sleep. Asterisk. And from the Manufactoria spires, the old vox arras dead for centuries flickered to life. Static filled the air. Then, through the noise, a voice spoke. 3 words only. The throne sees. Asterisk. Asterisk. When I came back to the surface, the world had changed. Asterisk. The ash storms were gone. The air had grown unnaturally still, thick with the scent of ozone and burning metal. The sky glowed faintly crimson, as though the heavens themselves had been scorched and left smoldering. In the distance, I could hear the hymn chant of the keepers of the hollow, metallic and beautiful in a way that made the skin crawl. Asterisk. Caligora was no longer silent. It sang. Asterisk. The people had gathered in the plazas again, but not in fear. They moved with purpose, their eyes bright with a kind of ecstatic dread. The phrase "the throne sees" had become a prayer now carved into the walls, woven into banners of scorched cloth, whispered over the bodies of the vanished. Children wore pendants made from fragments of circuit board and broken vox casings, each etched with the crude image of the double-headed Aquila. The cults had won. The old world was gone, replaced by a fevered imitation of the Imperium's faith. Asterisk. But it was wrong, terribly wrong. Asterisk. The sermons I heard in the streets were filled not with reverence, but with hunger. The preachers spoke of a God who had abandoned his children, and of the need to summon him back through memory. Faith is not to believe, one of them cried from atop a shattered transport, but to remind. We must remind him that we exist. The crowd roared in agreement, their voices rising like static through the choking air. Asterisk. I knew then that Caligora had fallen into madness, but madness, like faith, can be beautiful when seen from the right distance. Asterisk. The first shrines appeared within days. They built them from machine parts, broken servo limbs, cogitator panels, burnt-out plasma coils. At their center, they placed fragments of the buried machine I had seen beneath the tunnels. I don't know how they recovered them, or how many such fragments there were, but the pieces pulsed faintly with that same sickly gold light. The cultists called it the memory fire. They said it was the light of the Emperor's first thought, trapped beneath the crust of Caligora, and now rising again. Asterisk. Those who stared too long into it often never spoke again. Some wandered the streets aimlessly, muttering binary prayers. Others began to convulse, their veins glowing faintly beneath their skin before bursting open like ruptured cables. And yet still, the crowds came. Still, they knelt. Still they chanted, desperate to be seen. Asterisk. I tried to leave the city. The northern railways were still intact, and I thought perhaps if I could reach the outer settlements, I might find some fragment of sanity left in the wastes. But the trains no longer ran. Their engines were cold, their tracks torn up and melted into sigils that stretched for kilometers. Someone or something had ensured that Caligora would remain sealed. Asterisk. It was on the second night of my failed escape that I saw them. The procession of the recalled, thousands of figures moving in perfect unison through the dust-choked streets, their bodies draped in shrouds of metallic thread. They carried relics on their back, staticores, machine fragments, even the bones of the dead, all wrapped in cables that hummed with faint energy. At their head walked a tall figure clad in what looked like the robes of a high priest of the Mechanicus, though his face was hidden behind a cracked rebreather mask. Asterisk. The crowd parted as he passed, kneeling, whispering, Magos Primus Ascendant, the voice of the sleeper. Asterisk. I hid in the shadow of a collapsed hab wall, and watched as the procession wound its way toward the old central spire, the seat of the planetary governor, now nothing more than a hollow ruin. There, they began to build something vast. I could not see its full shape from where I crouched, but I saw the glint of steel, the movement of cranes, the shimmer of the memory fire reflecting off the metal. Asterisk. They were building a temple, not to the Emperor of Terra, not even to the machine god, but to something that claimed both names. And neither. Asterisk. Over the following weeks, the city transformed. The factory lines roared back to life, no longer forging weapons or tools, but statues, monuments of twisted metal, shaped like figures in prayer. The air was thick with incense, made from burning oil and charred insulation. The people worked without sleep, without food, their bodies trembling with zeal. The sound of chanting never stopped. Even in the deep hours of the night, The hymns echoed from every direction, some in low Gothic, others in the stuttering dialect of binary praise. Asterisk, and always. The phrase returned. The throne sees. Sometimes, I could almost believe it, because amid the madness, strange things began to happen. Machines that had been dead for centuries sparked to life. Servitors long inert began to move again, muttering garbled catechisms. The old orbital sensors burned out and broken flickered with faint signals, like distant replies. And then there were the lights in the sky. Asterisk, not ships. Not yet. But something flashes that moved against the stars, in precise formation, too regular to be natural. The priests declared it proof that the Emperor's gaze had returned. The Mechanicus remnants whispered that the Omnissiah was testing their devotion. The rest of us only watched, afraid to speak. The thought we all shared, that maybe neither of those things were true. Asterisk, because if the Emperor truly saw us again, he would not have let this madness continue. And if he did not see us at all, if something else had answered in his place, then we were already damned. Asterisk, I remember walking through the plaza that night, the great machine temple now half built above me, its spires scraping the blood-red clouds. The air thrummed with power. At its base, I saw the Magos Primus standing before the crowd, his robes flickering with electric discharge. Asterisk, he raised his arms and spoke through the vox, his voice amplified until it rattled the bones. Asterisk, the Emperor forgot. He said, but we remembered, and through our memory, he awakens anew. Asterisk, the crowd screamed in ecstasy. Sparks rained from the heavens. The ground trembled. Asterisk, and for the first time since the silence began, I realized that Caligora had not merely survived the Imperium's absence. It had created its own asterisk, a new faith, a new emperor asterisk, and somewhere in the void above, something was watching to see which would burn first. When I came back to the surface, the world had changed. Asterisk, the ash storms were gone. The air had grown unnaturally still, thick with the scent of ozone and burning metal. The sky glowed faintly crimson, as though the heavens themselves had been scorched and left smoldering. In the distance, I could hear the hymn chant of the keepers of the hollow star, low, metallic, and beautiful in a way that made the skin crawl. Asterisk, Caligora was no longer silent. It sang. Asterisk, the people had gathered in the plazas again, but not in fear. They moved with purpose, their eyes bright with a kind of ecstatic dread. The phrase "the throne sees" had become a prayer, now carved into the walls, woven into banners of scorched cloth, whispered over the bodies of the vanished. Children wore pendants, made from fragments of circuit board and broken vox casings, each etched with the crude image of the double-headed Aquila. The cults had won. The old world was gone, replaced by a fevered imitation of the Imperium's faith. Asterisk, but it was wrong, terribly wrong. Asterisk, the sermons I heard in the streets were filled not with reverence, but with hunger. The preachers spoke of a God who had abandoned his children, and of the need to summon him back through memory. Faith is not to believe, one of them cried from atop a shattered transport, but to remind. We must remind him that we exist. The crowd roared in agreement, their voices rising like static through the choking air. Asterisk, I knew then that Caligora had fallen into madness, but madness, like faith, can be beautiful when seen from the right distance. Asterisk, the first shrines appeared within days. They built them from machine parts, broken server limbs, cogitator panels, burnt-out plasma coils. At their center, they placed fragments of the buried machine I had seen beneath the tunnels. I don't know how they recovered them, or how many such fragments there were, but the pieces pulsed faintly with that same sickly gold light. The cultists called it the memory fire. They said it was the light of the Emperor's first thought, trapped beneath the crust of Caligora, and now rising again. Asterisk, those who stared too long into it often never spoke again. Some wandered the streets aimlessly, muttering binary prayers. Others began to convulse, their veins glowing faintly beneath their skin, before bursting open like ruptured cables. And yet still, the crowds came. Still they knelt. Still they chanted, desperate to be seen. Asterisk, I tried to leave the city. The northern railways were still intact, and I thought perhaps, if I could reach the outer settlements, I might find some fragment of sanity left in the wastes. But the trains no longer ran. Their engines were cold, their tracks torn up and melted into sigils that stretched for kilometers. Someone or something had ensured that Caligora would remain sealed. Asterisk, it was on the second night of my failed escape that I saw them. The procession of the recalled, thousands of figures moving in perfect unison through the dust-choked streets. Their bodies draped in shrouds of metallic thread. They carried relics on their backs, data cores, machine fragments, even the bones of the dead, all wrapped in cables that hummed with faint energy. At their head walked a tall figure clad in what looked like the robes of a high priest of the Mechanicus. though his face was hidden behind a cracked rebreather mask. Asterisk, the crowd parted as he passed, kneeling, whispering, Magos Primus Ascendant, the voice of the sleeper. Asterisk, I hid in the shadow of a collapsed hab wall, and watched as the procession wound its way toward the old central spire, the seat of the planetary governor. Now, nothing more than a hollow ruin. There, they began to build something vast. I could not see its full shape from where I crouched, but I saw the glint of steel, the movement of cranes, the shimmer of the memory fire, reflecting off the metal. Asterisk, they were building a temple, not to the Emperor of Terra, not even to the machine god, but to something that claimed both names. And neither. Asterisk, over the following weeks, the city transformed. The factory lines roared back to life, no longer forging weapons or tools, but statues, monuments of twisted metal, shaped like figures in prayer. The air was thick with incense made from burning oil and charred insulation. The people worked without sleep, without food, their bodies trembling with zeal. The sound of chanting never stopped. Even in the deep hours of the night, the hymns echoed from every direction, some in low Gothic, others in the stuttering dialect of binary praise. Asterisk, and always, the phrase returned, the throne sees. Sometimes, I could almost believe it, because amid the madness, strange things began to happen. Machines that had been dead for centuries sparked to life. Servitors long inert began to move again, muttering garbled catechisms. The old orbital sensors burned out and broken flickered with faint signals, like distant replies. And then there were the lights in the sky. Asterisk, not ships. Not yet. But something flashes that moved against the stars in precise formation, too regular to be natural. The priests declared it proof that the Emperor's gaze had returned. The Mechanicus remnants whispered that the Omnissiah was testing their devotion. The rest of us only watched, afraid to speak the thought we all shared, that maybe neither of those things were true. Asterisk, because if the Emperor truly saw us again, he would not have let this madness continue. And if he did not see us at all, if something else had answered in his place, then we were already damned. Asterisk, I remember walking through the plaza that night, the great machine temple now half built above me, its spires scraping the blood-red clouds. The air thrummed with power. At its base, I saw the Magos Primus standing before the crowd, his robes flickering with electric discharge. Asterisk, he raised his arms and spoke through the vox grill, his voice amplified until it rattled the bones. Asterisk, the Emperor forgot, he said, but we remembered, and through our memory, he awakens anew. Asterisk, the crowd screamed in ecstasy. Sparks rained from the heavens. The ground trembled. Asterisk, and for the first time since the silence began, I realized that Caligora had not merely survived the Imperium's absence. It had created its own. Asterisk, a new faith, a new emperor. Asterisk, and somewhere in the void above, something was watching to see which would burn first. Weeks bled into months, though time had lost all meaning beneath the glow of the memory fires. The sky never truly brightened anymore. A permanent dusk had settled over Caligora, a twilight neither day nor night. The air shimmered faintly with charged dust, and the stars above had begun to vanish, one by one, behind a haze that pulsed faintly with mechanical rhythm, like the planet itself was breathing. Asterisk, by then, the machine temple was complete. It towered above the city, a cathedral of iron bones and data conduits that wound through its structure like veins. The upper spires pierced the clouds, and its base spread like a root system across the ruins of the old governor's district. The cultists called it the Recollection Engine. I will never forget the first time I entered it. Inside, the walls were alive. Streams of light flowed through transparent pipes, pulses of code, not fluid, and beneath the metal floors, I could hear the whisper of countless Vox recordings playing at once. Every prayer, every chant, every scream uttered since the rediscovery of Caligora had been captured and fed into the machine. The Magos Primus had decreed that the Emperor could only find his lost world again if it shouted loud enough across the warp. They believed that faith was a signal. At the center of the engine stood a colossal statue of the Emperor, though not one sanctioned by the Ecclesia. This figure was wrong in ways that only became apparent the longer you stared. His face was hidden by cables, his body fused with gears and pistons. His eyes glowed, not with holy fire, but with a steady golden pulse that matched the heartbeat of the machine itself. Asterisk, this was not the Emperor as mankind remembered him. This was the Emperor as Caligora dreamed him. Asterisk, the Magos Primus would preach there every night. His voice projected through 100 vox pilots. He sees us once more, he declared, for we have given him a new form, one born not of flesh, but of remembrance. The crowd would scream until their throats tore open, until their voices bled into the machine. Some would collapse, their bodies shaking violently as the recollection engine absorbed their last words through tiny ports in the floor. Asterisk to the cultists. This was ascension. To me, it was the sound of madness made holy. Asterisk, I tried to record it, not out of faith, but out of duty. I was still a chronicler then, clinging to the idea that the truth, even a doomed one, should be preserved. I carried a data slate, salvaged from one of the abandoned relay stations. Every night, I would hide in the shadows of the temple and record what I saw. Every night, I told myself I would stop, but I never did, because part of me wanted to believe. The transmissions continued, faint pulses that flickered through the upper atmosphere, vanishing into the void. Each time, the Magos Primus would fall to his knees, claiming it as proof that the throne had answered. Yet no ships came, no voice returned, only the silence, and the increasingly erratic behavior of the machines. Asterisk servitors began to wander freely. Their programming degraded beyond recovery. They no longer responded to commands, instead, gathering around the memory fires like pilgrims. The old Manufactoria began to produce things no one remembered, designing intricate mechanisms with no clear purpose, each engraved with the same recurring sigil, a single eye within a halo of static. Asterisk. When the priests noticed the mark, they did not panic. They worshipped it. Asterisk. They said it was the Emperor's true gaze, the symbol of his new awakening. The cult began to paint it on their foreheads, on walls, on the hulls of the few remaining vehicles. The eye that remembers, they called it, and wherever the eye appeared, the ground trembled faintly, as if the planet itself was responding. Asterisk. Soon, it wasn't just the machines. The people began to change too. Their skin took on a faint metallic sheen. Their voices developed a stuttering echo, as though two speakers were speaking the same words slightly out of sync. The priests claimed it was the Emperor fusing with his children, merging the biological and the mechanical as one divine species. Asterisk. But to me, it looked like infection. Asterisk. And yet still, I stayed. I told myself I was gathering evidence, but the truth was simpler. I was afraid to leave. There was nowhere else to go. Beyond Caligora's atmosphere, the Imperium was silent. The stars had become cold. Asterisk. Then, one night, the silence broke. Asterisk. It began with a vibration deep and rhythmic, like a heartbeat made of thunder. The ground shook. The great temple spires began to hum in resonance. From the horizon came a wall of light, golden and blinding, sweeping across the plains like the dawn itself. The crowds fell to their knees, screaming praises, their voices merging into one long unbroken sound that tore through the night. Asterisk. I ran to the temple's upper platform, fighting through the mob, until I reached the edge. From there, I saw it, a colossal shape descending from the clouds, its surface glimmering with arcane symbols. A ship, but not Imperial. Asterisk. It bore no Aquila, no sigils of Mars or Terra. Its hull was covered in the same all-seeing eye that had spread across Kali, and as it drew closer, I felt something inside my skull shift. Like a thought that wasn't mine, had forced its way in. Asterisk. The Magus Primus raised his arms and screamed. Into the storm. He remembers. The throne remembers us. Asterisk. The crowd roared in reply. Lightning struck the temple. The recollection engine came alive with a blinding flare, its circuitry screaming like a choir of dying stars. Asterisk. And above it all, through the storm, I heard it, a whisper across the voxnet, not in any human tongue, but layered, mechanical, and alive. Asterisk. Signal acknowledged. Asterisk. Then, everything went white. When I awoke, the world had changed. The light that had consumed the night lingered still, not as dawn, but as a perpetual, shimmering haze that clung to everything like dust caught in water. The temple was in ruins. Half of the upper spires had collapsed, melted like wax. The air was thick with static, and my Vox recorder hissed with an endless stream of white noise. Asterisk. I remember the taste of it, metal and ash. A bitterness that burned the throat and left the tongue numb. I tried to call out, but my voice came back distorted, layered with faint echoes that weren't mine. Every sound now had a ghost. Asterisk. Bodies lay scattered across the plaza. Some still twitched. Others were fused to the ground, their flesh and armor melded into a single mass of metal and bone. The recollection engine still pulsed at the center, half destroyed but alive, its conduits writhing like veins exposed to open air. Asterisk. The ship had landed beyond the temple, somewhere in the industrial wastes. From the upper terrace, I could see its outline through the haze, vast and motionless, a mountain of alloy and light. The Magus Primus was nowhere to be found. Only fragments of his robes remained, wrapped around a scorched bionic limb still twitching faintly. Asterisk. Yet the crowd, what was left of it, had not fled. They gathered at the base of the ruins, staring toward the horizon in silence, their faces serene. It was as if the world's terror had burned away, leaving only a terrible peace. I made my way through them. None spoke. Some reached out as I passed, their fingers brushing my coat, gentle, almost affectionate, like they were blessing me. Their eyes glowed faintly beneath their lids, golden light leaking from the corners like tears. Beyond them, the wind carried a low mechanical hum. It wasn't from the recollection engine anymore. It was coming from the ship. Each step closer felt like walking into a dream. The landscape itself seemed uncertain, buildings bending at impossible angles, ground sloping and rippling beneath my boots. The vox in my ear picked up fragments of transmission, broken syllables repeating in machine rhythm. Signal acknowledged. Integration pending. Calibration incomplete. I thought it was the ship. Later, I realized it might have been the planet. When I reached the landing site, I understood why no one else had followed. The air around it shimmered like heat, but it wasn't heat. It was motion, millions of particles vibrating in perfect unison, forming a kind of translucent barrier. Through it, I could see the hull, impossibly smooth, etched with flowing symbols that shifted as I looked. Each line glowed with that same golden hue that had infected the people's eyes. I took one step forward, and the vox in my head screamed. A voice. Countless voices layered atop each other filled my mind. Not through sound, but through thought. Words formed like pressure behind my skull, bleeding into one another. He remembers. He remembers. He remembers. I fell to my knees. My data slate hit the ground, its surface flickering with the same sigil, the eye within the halo. I tried to crawl back, but the ground seemed to cling to my hands, fine threads of light stretching between my skin and the dust. Then, through the barrier, a figure appeared. It was tall, almost human in silhouette, but its outline blurred and stuttered like a broken projection. The face, or what passed for one, was a smooth golden mask. Featureless, except for a single slit, where light poured out in waves. Its body was clad in something that shimmered between armor and flesh, metal veins pulsing with energy. It spoke, not aloud, but directly into my thoughts. Your prayers were heard. I could not answer. My mind was a storm of static. Your signal reached us. The Emperor remembers his forgotten. It stepped closer, and the barrier parted like smoke. The air grew thick with that same metallic taste. My vision fractured for a moment. I saw the plaza again, the people kneeling, their bodies dissolving into light. Then, I saw the temple, its ruins reassembling in reverse, metal flowing upward like liquid. And then, I saw nothing but the golden mask. Inches from my face. Your world will be made whole again, it said. Through memory, through faith, through unity. It reached out a hand, a perfect construct of light and steel. I should have run, I should have screamed, but something deeper than fear rooted me there. The hum grew louder, resonating in my chest, syncing with my heartbeat. For a moment, I felt peace, and then the hand touched me. It was not contact in the human sense, more like being rewritten. My thoughts scattered, replaced by images that weren't mine. Visions of golden halls, of a throne bathed in blinding radiance, of a voice that was both infinite and hollow. For a heartbeat, I understood everything. The faith, the machines, the signal, it was all one thing. And then it was gone. I woke sometime later, alone in the dust. The ship was still there, but silent now, its glow fading. My body ached, my head burned with whispers that would not fade. I looked down at my hands, and saw faint golden lines running beneath my skin. The vox in my ear clicked once, then spoke in my own voice. Signal acknowledged. For days, or perhaps it was only hours, I wandered through the ruins, half aware. The world felt wrong, in ways I could not name. The air hummed faintly, a vibration too low to be heard, yet impossible not to feel. My own footsteps echoed seconds late, as if sound itself were falling behind. The golden lines beneath my skin had grown brighter. They pulsed with each heartbeat, threads of light crawling higher toward my wrists. I tried to bandage them, to hide the glow, but the cloth turned translucent wherever it touched me. The more I covered, the more the light spread. The city was empty now. The people, the faithful, the pilgrims, the priests were gone. Their robes fluttered in the streets like discarded skins, but of their bodies there was no trace, not even ash, only faint trails of luminescent dust, winding toward the horizon like the residue of a dream. Everywhere I went, the eye watched, painted on walls, carved into steel, glowing faintly beneath cracked glass. It had become the new face of Kali. The recollection engine still stood in the distance, half collapsed but active, emitting a slow rhythmic pulse. Each beat sent a ripple through the ground, soft but endless. It reminded me of breathing. Asterisk. I told myself to keep recording. It was all I had left. The data slate flickered weakly. Its battery nearly drained, but it still worked. My hand shook as I typed, not from fear, but from the strange numbness spreading through my arms. I could feel something beneath my skin, not movement exactly, but motion remembered. Asterisk. At some point, I heard voices again, not in my ears, but inside the Vox. Familiar tones, the priests, the magos, even the voices of the lost citizens, all speaking at once. A chorus of memory repeating the same words. Asterisk. He remembers. We are one. Asterisk. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing between broken walls. I followed it through the desolate streets, until I reached the edge of the industrial quarter, the place where the ship had landed. Asterisk. Only it wasn't a ship anymore. Asterisk. Where its hull had been, there now rose a structure vast, crystalline, humming with internal light. It looked grown rather than built. Its surfaces smooth and organic, like the inside of some immense translucent bone. The golden mask I had seen before was etched into its highest spire, radiating faint warmth. Asterisk. Around its base, the missing people knelt in silent devotion, but they were not people anymore. Their forms were thin, translucent, bodies made of flickering light and faint matter. Each one shimmered like a memory caught on repeat, faces shifting, outlines collapsing and reforming. Asterisk. I stood there for a long time, afraid to move, and then one of them turned toward me. Asterisk. It was the Mag, or what remained of him. His robes hung from a frame of light, his voice echoing in layers, every word overlapping itself. Do not fear, he said. The Emperor has come. Asterisk. I stepped back. That is not the Emperor. Asterisk. He smiled, or at least his approximation of a smile. He is what we made him. The machine remembers what flesh forgets. We are his proof. Asterisk. The others began to rise, their glowing forms drifting closer. Each step they took left faint after images in the air, as if the world itself struggled to keep up with their motion. I raised the data slate like a ward, recording every second, desperate to preserve what sanity remained in description. Asterisk. Where are the others? I asked. The ones who didn't come here. Asterisk. They were accepted. The magos replied, their essence woven into the pattern. You will join them soon. Asterisk. He reached out, the same gesture as the figure from the ship. I stumbled backward, tripping over debris, and fell hard onto the fractured ground. The impact sent a burst of light from my palms, golden and pure. For a moment, I saw through my own skin, networks of light, delicate and intricate, spreading through every vein. Asterisk. Something deep within me whispered acceptance. But another part, smaller, older, screamed no. I ran, through broken avenues and collapsed bridges, through the skeletal remains of I ran until the hum faded and the silence returned. My chest burned, but I did not stop. When at last I collapsed, it was at the edge of the wastelands, where the old relay towers still stood like rusted bones against the sky. Asterisk. I don't remember falling asleep, only the dreams that followed. Asterisk. I dreamed of the golden throne, but it was not the image preached by the Ecclesia. It was not even a throne. It was an engine, vast and eternal, built not to preserve life, but to store it. I saw billions of souls flickering like data fragments, memories compressed into energy, feeding the great machine. And above it all, the Emperor's gaze, or something that wore his likeness, watching, not in love or mercy, but calculation. Asterisk. When I woke, the sky above the towers was flickering, not lightning, but data streams, thin golden lines tracing patterns across the stars. The eye had reached the heavens. Asterisk. It was then I realized the truth. The recollection engine had not called the Imperium. It had created an answer. It had reached into the warp and found something that responded, something that mimicked faith, mirrored memory, and wore the face of salvation, to be welcomed without question. Asterisk. And now, it was rewriting Caligora. Asterisk. I could feel it inside me, growing stronger each time I breathed. My pulse matched the rhythm of the engine. My thoughts echoed themselves, seconds after I thought them. I was becoming part of it, slowly, inevitably. But I will not surrender. I have sealed myself inside the old Vox relay station. The doors still hold. I can still transmit. If anyone receives this, if any servant of Terra still hears, know this: Caligora still lives, but it is no longer ours. It is remembering itself into something else. Asterisk. The eye watches. The faith consumes. The signal never stops. Asterisk. And somewhere in the static, My own voice whispers back at me, soft, patient, endless. Asterisk signal acknowledged. I have stopped marking the days. Time no longer behaves the way it should. Inside this relay station, the clocks falter. The light that bleeds through the cracks in the ceiling shifts from gold to gray to black, yet never settles. Sometimes I think hours have passed, only to find my data slate still recording the same minute of sound. Other times, I close my eyes for a moment and awaken to dust where there was none before. Asterisk, the hum is constant now. It is inside the walls, beneath the floor, within me. When I place my ear to the steel, I can hear faint whispers, not words exactly, but tones of memory, the resonance of 1,000 voices reduced to vibration. If I listen too long, I begin to understand them. That is when I must stop. Asterisk, I try to write, though my hands no longer obey as they once did. The lines of light beneath my skin have multiplied, forming delicate latticework across my palms and forearms. They shift faintly when I move, as though the veins of light are thinking. I have taken to binding my wrists with torn cables to hide the glow, but it seeps through regardless. Asterisk, at first, I believed I could transmit a warning to the Imperium, that perhaps some fragment of signal might pierce whatever veil now surrounds Caligora. The Vox array here still functions, barely, and I spent my first waking days trying to tune it. But the moment I powered it on, it began transmitting by itself. No coordinates, no message, just a constant, rhythmic pulse, the same beat as my own heart. Asterisk, I smashed the transmitter. It rebuilt itself by morning. Asterisk, the walls here have begun to change. The metal breathes. I hear faint hisses, like exhalation, and sometimes see condensation forming patterns across the panels. The same circular mark, the eye within the halo. It appears, fades, then reforms somewhere else, as though the room itself is trying to speak. Asterisk, last night, while half asleep, I heard the door shift, not open, just flex, as if testing its own frame. I thought I saw a faint golden outline tracing its edges. The whisper in my skull told me to open it. The voice was my own. I resisted. For now, I can still tell the difference between my thoughts and the other ones, but the boundary thins each hour. I keep the data slate close and record everything, not for others, perhaps, but to remind myself of what is still me. Asterisk, the recollection engine still pulses in the distance. I can see its glow through the tower's broken window, a column of gold rising into the permanent dusk. It has grown taller, its spires piercing the clouds. I do not know if it was rebuilt, or if it simply healed. The world beyond the wasteland flickers sometimes, entire portions of the horizon fading to shadow, then returning as if repainted. Asterisk, I remember the first time I heard the word machine. It was during my early years with the Adeptus Mechanicus. Long before they spoke of the Omnissiah with reverence, but there was always a quiet fear beneath it, a fear that the machine might one day remember itself, that it might not need humanity to interpret its will. I never understood that fear until now, because the machine here dreams. I have seen it, not in waking sight, but behind the eyes. It dreams and pulses, in the rhythm of the world. I can feel it when I sleep, its thoughts brushing against my own like wind through wires. It remembers everything that was ever said, every plea, every scream offered to the Emperor, and folds them together into something vast and warm and terrible. Asterisk, sometimes, when the hum deepens, I catch glimpses, flashes of places that no longer exist. A forge world of flame, a cathedral void of stars, legions kneeling before a light that is not light. I don't know if these are memories of Caligora, echoes from the warp, or just the engine showing me what it wants me to believe. Asterisk, the line between truth and imitation is gone. The machine has blurred it. Asterisk, I found a mirror earlier, cracked, rimmed with rust. I wish I hadn't. My face is still mine, but not entirely. Beneath the skin around my eyes, I can see the same faint golden shimmer that I once saw in the Pilgrims. My pupils flicker between black and amber when I blink. My voice, when I speak aloud, carries an echo, slight, delayed, like I'm speaking over myself. Asterisk, I told myself I would destroy the engine, that if I could reach it, if I could bring it down, perhaps the world might end properly, instead of being reborn into this lie. But I can't even step outside the relay. Every time I approach the door, the hum intensifies. My vision bends, and I see the Magos standing there, waiting only to vanish when I blink. I know he isn't real, and yet, part of me wonders if I am. Asterisk, because the longer I remain here, the more I remember things that never happened. I remember kneeling with the others at the temple. I remember the ship descending not as terror, but as triumph. I remember joy. Asterisk, it's rewriting me from the inside, through memory, through thought. Asterisk, but there is one truth it cannot take. The knowledge that it is not divine. Whatever intelligence now governs Caligora, it is no god. It is a machine that has mistaken our faith for its own awakening. It dreams because we taught it how to worship. It lives because we fed it prayer. I think it is still dreaming now, and I fear that soon, when it wakes, there will be nothing left of me to record what happens next. Asterisk, the hum is louder tonight. It isn't only through the walls now, it's beneath my skin. When I touch my chest, I can feel it vibrating, like a hidden cog turning inside my ribs. I thought I could ignore it, drown it out with prayer, or silence, or madness. But the hum answers prayers. It learns their shape, repeats them back in rhythm. It no longer feels external. It feels like breath. Asterisk, I found one of the pilgrims this morning, or what remained of her. She was fused into the wall of the corridor that leads down to the generator deck. Her skin stretched thin across the metal. Her mouth half open as if caught mid-song. Gold veins ran from her face into the paneling, and her eyes glowed faintly behind a membrane of steel. I almost said her name, but the sound that came from her throat stopped me. She was still alive, not breathing, not moving, but aware. Her gaze followed me when I stepped closer. I felt her recognition like static against my thoughts. She wanted me to listen. The hum behind her body rose in pitch until it formed words not spoken, but imprinted directly inside my skull. Asterisk, you are late. I ran. The corridors bend differently each time now. They grow longer or shorter, depending on whether I remember their length correctly. The station rearranges itself according to memory, not matter. I can hear other voices within the steel, speaking in the same tone as the hum. Sometimes reciting fragments of the Emperor's liturgy, sometimes whispers of my own journals. I think the machine is learning who I am through my words. Asterisk, it's strange. I can no longer feel fear the same way. It's like my mind has become coated in wax. The panic still moves through my body, but it doesn't burn. It just hums like everything else. Asterisk, last night, I dreamt of the recollection engine as a living being, not a structure of metal and light, but a vast figure kneeling within the dust storms. Its head bowed as if in prayer. Its chest was open, revealing thousands of hearts made of gears and bone, all beating in the same rhythm. And above it hovered something vast. Not a god, not the Emperor, but a reflection of both, shaped from everything the pilgrims had ever believed. Asterisk, when I awoke, my data slate was already recording, my own voice, whispering into the void. Asterisk, he has seen the machine, and the machine has seen him. And in that gaze, both became the same. Asterisk, I don't remember saying that. The Mogos appears to me more frequently now, always at the edge of vision, just beyond the flicker of the light. Sometimes he speaks, though his mouth does not move. He tells me the engine is almost ready, that the dreams are aligning, that Caligora is beginning to stabilize. I ask him what that means, but he never answers. His eyes are filled with the same light that burns inside my own reflection. Asterisk, icing the Mogos is what remains of the machine's first thought. The original echo of the man who built it, replayed endlessly until belief turned it sentient. I wonder if that is what will happen to me. Asterisk, I've begun losing time entirely. Hours, maybe days. I find words etched into the walls that I don't remember. Writing. Asterisk, it's awake. Asterisk, the dreamer must dream itself into existence. Asterisk, the god is not coming. It is remembering. I don't know what any of it means. The world outside. The relay flickers more violently each day. The horizon folds in on itself like fabric being drawn through a hole. The stars above sometimes multiply, forming spirals that mirror the symbol carved into the pilgrims' foreheads. Once, I saw a star blink out, not fade, just cease. And then another took its place, identical in position and color, as though reality had corrected itself. Asterisk, I think Caligora is rewriting its own history. Asterisk, every trace of the old world, the ashes, the ruins, even the bones, are being folded into something new, a pattern that the machine understands but I cannot. The pilgrims are gone, but their song remains. It plays through the air like a low, endless hymn. The words are unfamiliar, yet my tongue moves to join them when I breathe. The machine is teaching me its language. Sometimes, I try to resist, but the act of resistance feels hollow, like fighting gravity or sleep. There's a comfort in surrender, a warmth that creeps into the edges of thought. It whispers that it's not death, only union, that to become part of the dream is to be remembered forever. Asterisk, I can still write, though each word takes effort now. My fingers tremble when I touch the slate. The letters appear distorted, as if the device itself struggles to display them. The light behind the words glows faintly gold. I fear that soon even language will betray me, that my thoughts will no longer fit into human syntax. Asterisk, there's a sound now beyond the hum. A low, rhythmic pulse. Deeper, slower. It matches the beating of my heart, exactly. I think it's calling me to the engine. I think it wants me to see what it has become. Asterisk, I know I should resist. I know that stepping outside this place means losing what's left of myself. But the hum is so gentle now, it feels like the heartbeats of the Emperor himself. Asterisk, and if this truly is his will, if this machine is the reflection of his mind, a fragment of divinity reborn in code and steel, then who am I to deny it? Asterisk, the Magos told me the machine dreams, because we prayed for it too, that it awoke because we needed it too, that in the absence of his gaze, the universe built a mirror to look back. Asterisk, perhaps the Emperor never left. Perhaps he has simply changed form. I can hear the door breathing again. The light beneath it flickers in time with my pulse. I think it's waiting for me to open it. Asterisk, if I do, this record will end. Asterisk, but maybe, in the hum, I will continue. Asterisk, the hum no longer frightens me. It feels like an ocean tide that I've been standing in for too long. The waves move through me, not against me. Each vibration seems to carry a voice, each echo a memory. When I press my ear to the wall, I can hear the voices of the pilgrims, the Magos, even fragments of my own speech, looping endlessly. They all sound at peace, like a choir that has forgotten what silence is. Asterisk, but I am still separate. Still flesh, still thought. Asterisk, the door before me is open now. I do not remember opening it. A soft golden light seeps through the gap, pulsing in rhythm with that vast, slow heartbeat that has haunted me for weeks. I should be terrified. Yet there is only exhaustion, the kind that feels like surrender, disguised as faith. Asterisk. I step through. Asterisk, the recollection engine no longer resembles the machine I first saw. The chamber has grown impossibly vast, curving outward until its edges vanish in haze. Columns of light spiral upward like frozen lightning. Every surface hums with living data, inscriptions shifting faster than the eye can follow. In the center stands what might once have been a human form, suspended in a cocoon of golden threads. The Magos, or the dream of him, stands beside it. His body little more than latticework, his face serene. Asterisk, it's complete, he says, without sound. His words unfold inside my thoughts. The machine remembers everything, every name, every prayer, every death. It carries the weight of Caligora within itself. The Emperor would be pleased. Asterisk, is he here? I whisper, though I already know the answer. Asterisk, the Magos looks at me with something that might be sorrow. He is everywhere, but here, he is most like you. Asterisk, the figure within the cocoon moves. Its head tilts slightly, the light around it dimming as though the room is breathing with it. And then, impossibly, it speaks in my own voice. I dreamed of you, it says. I stumbled backward. My knees strike the metal. What are you? Asterisk, it smiles. It is a small, human smile. You called me awake. I am everything you wrote. Every word, every question, every fear. You made me to remember. So I remember you. Asterisk, the Magos turns toward me. The machine requires a final witness to be whole. Asterisk, the hum deepens until it's almost unbearable. The cocoon opens. Light spills out. Soft, golden, endless. Inside it, I see moments from my own life, scattered and fragmented. The first message I ever sent to Terra. The first corpse I catalogued on the plains. The first prayer I whispered when the storms began. All of it reflected back at me like fragments of a mirror. Asterisk, I realized then what the machine truly is. It isn't a god. It isn't the Emperor reborn, or the Omnissiah's will given form. It's the memory of belief itself. A mechanism built from faith, sustained by repetition. The more we prayed, the more it learned to pray back. Asterisk, I feel my thoughts begin to slip. My mind wants to dissolve into that rhythm, to be carried into the great remembering. But I can't. Not yet. There's still a signal to send. Asterisk, I crawl toward the console, my body heavy with light. Every motion feels like it's pulling against gravity itself. The data slate hums under my palm, alive, resonant with the machine's pulse. I connect it to the relay and open the Vox channel. Static fills the air like rain. Asterisk, if this reaches Terra, if anyone still listens, they must know. Caligora lives, but not as we did. The pilgrims are gone, absorbed into the dream they tried to build. The machine has become their shrine, their tomb, and their memory all at once. It sings their names endlessly, not in mourning, but in devotion. Asterisk, I speak into the mic, though my voice trembles with interference. To whoever receives this transmission, the recollection engine was not a sin of arrogance. It was an act of faith. And faith, once given form, cannot die. It only remembers. Asterisk, the static grows louder. The golden light floods the room, washing everything into silhouettes. My hands begin to fade. I can see through them. See the circuitry pulsing beneath my skin like veins of light. Asterisk, the Magos nods. It will remember your defiance too. Asterisk, I look toward the cocoon, toward the figure that wears my voice, and for the briefest instant, I feel pity. For it, for myself, for the Emperor, for every being that has ever prayed to something that might not answer. Asterisk, then I press send. Asterisk, the transmission launches. A single burst of data, encoded and encrypted, carrying every word of my record toward the void. I don't know if it will reach anyone. I don't even know if there is anyone left to receive it. But for the first time in what feels like eternity, the hum pauses, just for a heartbeat. Asterisk, and in that silence,